Okay, so welcome to another large training weekend as part of the preparations for the Marathon des Sables. Today's date is the 17th of March, which means from tomorrow I pretty much have exactly 4 weeks until we depart for the Marathon des Sables. So this is pretty much the final large preparatory weekend. Heading into this, it's been a relatively aggressive week from a volume perspective, which has created the most demand on my ability to regulate energy, tasks and time so far, but it's one that I've actually enjoyed. This weekend, we have a 6-hour run hike tomorrow and a 6-hour run hike on Sunday. So you might be wondering, what the fuck is with your surrounding? Are you recording this from your nan's? No, I am recording this from an Airbnb in the Yorkshire Dales because I could think of no better place to get the 2 6-hour sessions nipped than by doing the Yorkshire Three Peaks twice. For those of you who are familiar with the Yorkshire Three Peaks, the challenge is that you depart and arrive back at the Pen-y-Ghent Calf in Horton and Ribblesdale within a 12-hour time frame. It's 24.9 miles, so essentially 25 miles, and you're supposed to do it in 12 hours. If you do it in 12 hours from punching in to clocking back in again, that is you a successful completer of the Yorkshire Three Peaks. So I thought, you know what, based on current performance trends, based on what time we're able to do, over the past couple of weeks, fuck it, why not? I believe we can average 4 miles an hour for 6 hours, which means we're going to do the Yorkshire Three Peaks twice in a weekend. On top of that, there's some other developmental changes too. Firstly is that as we get close to the event, the necessity for specificity increases. Try saying that when you're a bit pissed. But yeah, the necessity for specificity increases. Namely, I'm going to be using foods that I'm actually going to be using on the event over the course of this weekend. This is currently really hot because I'm making my food, I'm doing concurrent activity. So I'm making this as I'm recording this. And this is the fire pot chicken keema curry. And it is fucking exceptional from an ingredient and a macronutrient perspective. One of the biggest challenges I'm going to face on the MDS is getting enough high quality protein. And many people turn to proteins that have a very, very low quality in terms of when we analyze their amino acid profile, they suggest that the bioavailability is not great, and often when it's really high in fiber, i.e. if it's a vegan or a soy sauce, it can cause quite a lot of gastric distress too. This comes in at a fucking whopping 63.8 grams of protein, which is ordinarily more than I'd look for in a single serving if I were here in optimal circumstances. But in the desert, for the greatest proportion of the day, I'm going to be using just high carbohydrate snack foods, intra-workout powders, gels, so on and so forth. So backfilling in the evening means I'm able to hit like 2 grams, pretty much exactly 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, which is going to be a game changer for like cellular recoverability and also satiety on the event. So really looking forward to getting stuck into this. Also a change in day sack. So day sack or backpacks, packs, whatever you want to call them, it's probably one of the most, if not the most frequently asked question that I get. And up until now, I've been using the Raid-Lite 24, and as the name suggests, it's 24 litres. But it's only actually 24 litres if you're using the front pouch. And I made the decision that actually I'm not going to use that modular front pouch because of the way it distributes load. It makes the day sack very hard to get on and off. It's literally a 5-minute job to clip yourself in. And then when you're under stress and fatigue, you're tired, you're going to forget something, which in the back, and it's unclipping, clipping up again. I thought, you know what, fuck that. So then it became a 20-litre day sack, which is, in my opinion, just not enough for the amount of food and kit and equipment I aspire to carry over the week. So I thought, right, we're going to upgrade the day sack, we're going to get a slightly bigger one. So I was speaking to a guy who I'm actually going to be sharing a tent with, Mr. Brian Woods. If you're listening, thank you for the nod. And he'd been using the Ultimate Direction 40 litre. Now, I don't know if it's actually 40 litres, if I'm honest. If it is 40 litres, it's a fucking small 40 litres, but it's easily a good 35, which is a marked improvement. Because even though I won't fill it, there's nothing worse than an overly jam-packed day sack whereby you can't get things in and out. And obviously, if it's too full, it changes the actual shape, which means it then compresses the thoracic cavity and makes it just that little bit harder to breathe. And when we're going to be fucking hanging out for 6 to 7 days as it is, percentile gains are no longer marginal. They are the difference between, hang out or succeed. So we're going with this, and I have tested, I've got to say, even with the same load, the way it distributes, because it's slightly more structured, which you pay for with the weight, but I believe it's worth it, because it's slightly more structured, supportive, and the way in which it's like sort of engineered and the way it distributes load, subjectively, it feels much, much less problematic to carry heavier load. So really, really looking forward to using that tomorrow. As I said, doing the Yorkshire Three Peaks tomorrow and again the day after. I think weather is forecast to be pissing down the entire time. Welcome to the north of England, but very much looking forward to getting stuck in. I'm going to record some stuff on the phone tomorrow where we're actually on the ground. And then I'll check back in with you guys on Sunday morning to see if I'm still as energized and fresh at that point. So you're joining me on sort of hour one of day one, and today is going to be between 5 and 6 hours depending on route variability, etc., because I've not actually done this route before. One thing I wanted to discuss was exactly what I'm doing now, walking, more specifically the willingness to accept that when you start doing ultra endurance, walking is going to be happening a lot more than you anticipate, and why actually as a result of that, so much of ultra endurance is in the mind. Like, your body will really cope with pretty much anything you prepared it for. 2-3 S&T sessions per week, if they're intelligently programmed and you're fucking squared away, you're sweet. However, so many individuals allow insecurity to drive their pace, especially in the opening legs of, just checking my route, especially in the opening legs of these really long sessions. Joining me about the 10-mile mark. As you can see, the weather has taken a rather inclement turn. If there's one thing you can guarantee in the Yorkshire Dales, is that at some point over the course of the day, you're going to get fucking pit wrapped. So pack accordingly. The terrain is, I wouldn't go as far as technical, but it's very steep. Obviously very challenging on the lower limbs. And this is where your strength and conditioning comes into its own. Not least lower limb unilateral strength and power endurance, but also your postural robustness, what we refer to as movement fidelity. Because what we tend to see under stress, fatigue, and a degree of duress is that individuals' movement mechanics obviously starts to change. Now, you wouldn't notice this just walking up the stairs, for an example, but walk up 1,000 stairs that are uneven when you're fucking struggling to breathe and with load on your back, and you'll see people's hips start to shoot out the back, so they're loading their lumbar, their knees are valgusing, so they're really causing a lot of untoward strain on tendinous structures throughout the knee, and it's beginning of the end because shit's starting to break down. So this is really the value of strength and conditioning, pacing, lower limb unilateral strength and work capacity, and also your breath work, working on primary and secondary respiratory tissues too, to ensure that you can overcome climbs like that. So good morning and welcome to Sunday morning in my Yorkshire Dales Airbnb again, hence the dodgy crockery set. But yesterday we completed 20 miles in pretty much exactly 5 hours. A little bit of a change of plan. Was due to be doing the full 24, then actually when we looked at what it is we needed to gain from the weekend, we thought, right, okay, in terms of risk with reward management, there was no necessity for us to push the pace or add additional volume for the sake of, well, basically ego. When we were then potentially looking at overuse injuries or creating such an enormous recovery demand that we can't facilitate good recoverability, because we are heading into the heat chamber on Wednesday. So you're only really going to get kind of 1.5 full days recovery and recuperation. We want to make sure we're relatively fresh going to the heat chamber on Wednesday. So we took an hour off yesterday, and then we're taking an hour off again today. So today I'm again doing 20 miles, but a little bit less load in the day sack. So it's going to be around about 5 and a bit kg this morning, as opposed to 8 yesterday, which should mean that we're able to push the pace somewhat and maybe come in around the 4.5 hour mark. In terms of how I'm feeling, well, got back in yesterday, hydrated, got all the food on, and my stomach seems to be taking all those foods really very well. One of my skills and superpowers is I can pretty much eat anything, anytime, anywhere, and have very little gastric distress. So yeah, that's all gone swimmingly well. Had a little bit of a stretch off as well, and the body feels, well, it feels like you did 20 miles yesterday, but it doesn't feel problematically stiff, sore, or in any way niggly or injured. I'm a little bit tired this morning. I woke up in the exact same position that I fell asleep in, but again, I think that's fair given not only the 20 mile yesterday, because as a single event, that's not well, it was hard, but it's not anything to write home about. But I think across the course of 24 weeks preparatory training and real high tempo of business operations too, it's just begun to start to tire me out a little bit now. So we're at the exact right point. We're exactly where we need to be, in that we are going to be starting to taper after this weekend. So that's very much being looked forward to. So yeah, I felt a little bit tired this morning, but as I said, all good. Haven't had a coffee yet. Shah actually bought me like an electric coffee grinder for my birthday about a month ago. So I was really looking forward to using that this weekend, and it's a fucking dud. Nothing on her whatsoever. It's a really good bit of kit, but it's a fucking dud, doesn't work. So I've been without coffee. So I'm going to try and scope out a coffee shop here in the local village of Ingleton over the next sort of 40 minutes, and then that'll be me on the road again. Gonna have a little bit of a stretch out, warm up and mobilise as well. But from my perspective, I'm kind of thinking, well, the only thing to do now is to do it. The only way to find out how it's going to feel is to go and fucking do it. So pretty optimistic about getting stuck in and getting started there. But otherwise, this weekend, touch wood, is going really quite well. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is challenge me, stretch me without injuring me. So yeah, it's just now a case of getting stuck in, fuck around and find out. So that is me done, and now back home in Manchester. So today, Sunday, was day 2 of 2, and we were doing another 20-mile loop, but this time the governance was to reduce the load somewhat and then increase the pace as a consequence of that. So today we did 20 miles with 3,000 feet of elevation, so a little bit less than 4,000 yesterday, and got that done in 4 hours 17. Honestly, I was thinking it was going to be a little bit faster than that. As I got towards the last sort of 5 miles, I was like, I have got this fucking nipped. And then there's always the way in ultra running, so I've learned thus far, whenever you then have an expectation that you're coasting into the finish line, it will always come around to bite you in the ass, because you start setting expectations and then ultimately they are never met. So it was just a gradual incline through stick-sucking fucking shitty bog over farmers' fields for the last sort of 5 miles. But ultimately we still got around to 4 hours 17, so really pretty happy with that. From a body perspective, there was a little bit of complaint from both knees, but it's really important to understand there's a difference between complaint, i.e. a little bit of pain, and actual injury. Ultimately, when you're doing a 4,000 foot and then a 3,000 foot, that's an enormous amount of volume, especially on the eccentric loading, so going down on the knee. So, sometimes the patellar tendon and other structures in that anterior portion of the knee can get a little bit pissed off, but as soon as we got onto flat and then back onto uphill stuff, like it seemed to sort of take care of itself. So nothing that I'm particularly concerned about. Have got a black toe on this right big toe, which I'm pretty confident is probably going to come off in the not too distant. Hopefully it actually comes off before the MDS, so I can just wrap it up and then sort of tape it accordingly. But otherwise, things to take away. Well, the fueling and hydration strategy worked really quite well. That being said, as you'll see from some of the footage, I'm using these. The reason for that being, with the new these are Rhodes, okay, so these are made for use with the Rhodes day sack. Like all of the positioning is orchestrated to facilitate that. With the new ultimate direction, it doesn't work, so you end up basically running and just getting fucking poked in the face, which is more than a little bit frustrating. So I've had to shit can these, which means that I'll be using kind of a normal sports top sort of bottle for the foreseeable, which is not the end of the world. It's either here or there. It's a little bit less convenient, but ultimately it's not a make or break. Fueling went really quite well. I deliberately withheld fuel on today's event, which might seem a little bit counterintuitive, even a little bit ridiculous, but ultimately I really wanted to begin to replicate a little bit of depletion, a little bit of fatigue, as it will be on the event. So I got around the 20 miles in a decent pace, using just what was in fluid bottles, so 30 grams of carbs per bottle. And then a real meal bar, okay, and that was pretty much it. So I was really pretty comfortable and confident with that, because I'm going to have more fuel than that available to me on the MDS, so really pretty confident with that. So body, happy with. Fueling strategy, relatively happy with. Psychologically, I really felt like I had fun today. What I mean by that is there were some moments, especially in the last 5 miles, when I was like, fuck this, fuck that. But generally, I was able to feel pretty relaxed. And I knew going into it, this is going to be hard. This is the hardest thing you've done so far in your preparation. So it's okay if you struggle. It's okay if you find it hard. Just fucking try and enjoy it. And I was able to really do that for the greatest extent. I feel strong on the uphill, which makes life a little bit easier. Downhill, there was some wincing now and again from the knees, but again, nothing that wasn't seeing itself off when we got onto the flat. So I was really able to kind of just enjoy it, and take it as it came. That might not be the case on MDS, because at some point everyone's going to get tired, everyone's going to get pissed off, everyone's going to get irritable because of the heat, and that's without adding the other sort of survival issues which are known on the MDS. Like, people get diarrhea and vomiting, people get all sorts of heat-related illnesses and blisters and all that sort of stuff. So, there's not really much we can do to prepare for that other than fuck around and find out and see what comes on the day. But yeah, from my perspective, it felt like a really, really productive training weekend. So now it's, again, hydration, plenty of food going in. Going to get a little bit of work done this evening and then prepare for the week ahead. I've already preliminarily scheduled sort of my agenda for the upcoming 7 days from a business perspective. But this is the reality of managing, business and endurance, or just this is the reality of just, managing individual, professional, athletic, and leadership-oriented goals, as we talk often about in the Hard to Kill program, is just allocating 10 minutes. Even 10 minutes can save you hours of wasted time, procrastination, so on and so forth for the remainder of the week. So I'm just going to put a little bit of time aside to just reiterate and reconfirm, make sure I know what's coming, what's in store for me this week, and then I'll get my head down, have a good night's sleep, fingers crossed, and then we'll fucking go to work this week. So you're joining me today on Tuesday the 28th. We're actually 9-10 days since that weekend. The reason you're not hearing from me prior to that is actually that weekend took a lot out of me, whilst I enormously enjoyed it, and it was a fantastic confidence boost and proof of all of our work heading up to that point. 40 miles in a weekend, it was fucking tough. So as a result, allostatic load was high, general fatigue was really, really high heading into this week. So it was the real first challenge to me of regulating my emotions in terms of how I respond to that, regulating my time, regulating my energy to continue to train, to lift, to nourish myself, to rest, and to operate the Hard to Kill program. I think it's important, I'm really transparent here as well. My sleep has been really disrupted and really quite broken this week. And on paper, you'd think, well, if you're exhausted, you'd sleep better. But actually what we found is the opposite. When you've created such a demand and such an amount of stress on your central nervous system, it's quite simply like you're running from a lion. It does not know. Your body does not understand you're preparing for an event. No matter how much you try and reframe it, like, systematic stress was really high, which meant that I was struggling to get to sleep and struggling to stay asleep. So as a result, I had to really double down on my baseline standards, my habits, actions, and behaviors. And that is when it's imperative to have created systems, to have robust baseline standards in your life, so that even if you have to fall back to them, you're still performing to a very high standard. And inside the Hard to Kill program, we refer to this as either raising the bar or raising the ceiling. Everyone talks about raising the bar and performing to a higher standard, and that's great, but you're only ever going to be able to demonstrate your greatest potential for a very small amount of time infrequently. Like, for example, doing that 40 mile on the weekend. That was raising the bar for me. But what allows you to access heightened bars and heightened peak performance is having a floor that is already outperforming most of the people, or where you used to be. So how you approach nutrition, recovery, for me, spaciousness, i.e. like meditation, journaling, all these kind of practices that allow me to do my sort of day job really extraordinarily well and continue to do it to the best of my ability, and also recover as an athlete, nourish myself appropriately, so on and so forth. Because historically, in years gone by, and what we see in aspirational people is when they're fatigued, when they know they're not functioning to their greatest capacity, they become quite self-critical. They judge themselves, they beat themselves up, saying, I'm such a fucking mong, like I'm struggling, why am I struggling, so on and so forth. This preparation, this event is supposed to be really hard. I was always going to struggle. I needed to struggle at some point in time, and I had to keep reframing and revisiting that thought, because the reason I wanted to do this was I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. I wanted to test my belief. I wanted to test what would happen when I'm continuously looking to elevate the ceiling and raise the bar. And now I've started to get an understanding of that, and I've grown as a result. So across the last 10 days, we had a physio appointment, which was fucking barbaric. There was more of the dry needling that you might have seen in prior episodes. And it really has just been about doubling down on mobility, on meditation, on sleep, nutrition, all of the things that have allowed me to get back to a really, really good heightened standard of performance moving forward. So it's been a productive training week, albeit not a particularly glamorous or sexual one. But you have to be very honest about that. And I think it's, again, very important that I'm transparent that it's been a fucking hard week. It's been difficult to manage all of those things. But because we persevered, because persistence beats resistance, because we had that high baseline, here we are now, about to head into another fantastic training weekend, and we're beginning the taper sort of process into the event. So, you know, a really, really cool, very, very productive training block, a fantastically challenging, very rewarding training weekend. So as I've spoken to, yes, the fatigue was high, but ultimately that had to be the case. We want to create a stress, we want to then recover, but recover does not often mean total rest when you were looking at the specificity of an event as Herculean as this. And that's why, again, throughout my training, throughout the periodization, it hasn't been about single feats of raising the bar. It's been about getting used to performing on tired legs. It's been about getting used to performing with repeatability. And that can break down the body and the mind structurally, psychologically, emotionally. It really can break you down. So in the next episode, we're going to discuss some fantastic insights on how we can at least weatherproof ourselves from a physiological perspective, how we can use strength and conditioning to protect and safeguard our joint capsules, our tendons and ligaments, our posture, so on and so forth, from breaking down unnecessarily. And we're also going to have a fantastic conversation with none other than two-time MDS winner, Elizabeth Barnes, about how we're going to approach the coming weeks from a nutritional perspective, a logistical perspective, to not guarantee success, because we can't do that. We're never going to be able to do that. But how we can create an environment where the odds are in our favor, where it's not a fair fight, and we're giving ourselves the best possible chance to demonstrate excellence come the day of the race.